All right, let's talk about Omicron and what's happening with the Omicron variant in the United Kingdom. Yesterday, the UK reported its first death from the Omicron variant. UK PM Boris Johnson has imposed tougher restrictions and has also cautioned that the variant could overcome immune defenses of those inoculated with 2 shots of vaccines. Now, why is the UK situation important? Because they are using the AstraZeneca in large quantities, which is pretty much what most of India that is vaccinated is using as well, which is the Covishield. It's the same formula, it's the same vaccine, essentially. What it's also showing is that the Omicron has been tagged as mild from what South African doctors are saying. But is it something that can be treated with the kind of disdain that we're really seeing? Countries around the world are pushing for booster shots as they are in the UK. In India, we're still figuring out what to do next. So we want to get some clarity on the situation as it's quickly developing. To help us do that today, I'm joined now by Dr. Shahid Jameel, who's a virologist, and Dr. Suneela Garg, who's member of the National COVID Task Force. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us. Dr. Jameel, I believe you are in the UK right now. Can you give us a sense of what the situation seems to be? I mean, from the headlines, we are gleaning that it's quite panicky. Our numbers rising very fast. Is there a very genuine concern over there, which is why everyone's being urged to take a booster shot?
Well, Tamanna, in the UK, yes, the level of concern has gone up because of a modeling study that came from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, which suggested that between the 1st of December and the end of April, UK is looking at, in the best case scenario, about 175,000 hospitalizations and 25,000 deaths. The worst case scenario is, of course, much worse, projecting 75,000 deaths. So there is a lot of concern here. And because of that, the first thing that has happened is something they call Plan B, which is masks have been made mandatory in public transport and indoors and all of that. And many physical events are being curtailed. They're becoming online events. But beyond that, the markets appear to be as full of Christmas shoppers as ever. So yes, there is concern, but I don't think it's percolating that much to the public at large. But the numbers that are being projected are quite frightening, actually.
So, Dr. Jameel, what do you make of these projections? The broader question that we're asking is that as far as Omicron is concerned, the narrative so far has been that it's fairly mild. Yes, there is vaccine, there is immunity escape. So even if you're vaccinated twice, you could get it, but nothing much seems to be happening. And the world has had, a sort of a lessening of anxiety about it. Now we hear that in UK it's moving in the opposite direction. So is UK the outlier, or is there reason to be concerned about Omicron more than we previously were?
Well, I haven't seen the details of the modeling, but it comes from a prestigious place. Having 175,000 hospitalizations over the next 4-5 months would mean a huge number of infections, millions of infections. So I'm a little skeptical of that, considering how much UK has been vaccinated. More than a third of UK's total population has already received booster shots. So in that scenario, getting so many hospitalizations and deaths seems to be a little unreal, at least to me at this point.
You know, you've had a top medical officer in Moderna also say today that the Omicron shouldn't be taken lightly and it could possibly coexist with the Delta. So we're looking at possibilities of double infections. Dr. Suneela Garg, what do you make out of the latest sort of news and numbers coming in from Europe and the United Kingdom? Is it a cause for concern for us here in India?
It's a very, very important question. You see, when we are looking at an overall COVID scenario, particularly when we are talking of 5 countries, when we are talking of USA, UK, Germany, France, etc., these European countries, when we are talking of, so when we look at these countries, we are getting, substantially large number of cases also. And we should not forget about the fact that basically these countries have created the immunity because of the vaccination. Whereas if we look at from the Indian perspective, we have got 134 crore plus vaccinations. Plus, along with that, we had huge chunk of, people who suffered from infections during wave 1, wave 2. And after that also, whichever sero surveys we carried out, in different parts of the country, apart from large ICMR sero survey, which showed, more than, approximately around 67% seropositivity. But then after that, when we looked at Delhi, it was 90% seropositives and all that, and even Maharashtra also. So that's where we see that, India has got the, natural infections in large numbers, and India has got, also vaccination coverage in large numbers. So if we were to view the two things, only one thing which can compromise, because looking at Omicron virus, which is a highly transmissible and infectious virus, at this stage, basically more important thing would be in Indian context, because our cases are now quite substantially low. We are looking at yesterday's number also where, we got approximately less than 6,000 cases. So it is very important that we promote at this platform that COVID appropriate behavior is one thing. We have got approximately 58 cases of Omicron. If we were to look at 28 cases in Maharashtra and Gujarat, and Delhi has got 4 more cases. So the cases will come. You see, we can only delay the occurrence of cases, but more important at this point of time will be and Entegi and NVEC. Both of them are looking at, these cases as well. So I think there is no point to panic, but it is more important is that our systems are quite prepared. And another thing is that the time, when we will be looking at the vaccination point, and all, to begin with, if at all, when we look at and the evidence is there from the scientific perspective, then naturally, our elderly, immunocompromised, and healthcare workers, first of all, they would be given a priority if, once the decision is taken. But as of now, what I say is that we are enough, protected with regard to natural infections, and, people are rather doubly protected. And most of us.
You made that point, ma'am. Okay, so true. What you're saying is true, but it's like a sense of deja vu, because the same things were said before the second wave and after the first wave subsided, that we had gained some natural immunity, and then the Delta came around. Omicron right now, the word on the street, so to speak, is that it is quite mild, but we are seeing UK up the ante. Dr. Jameel, in the Indian context, do you concur with this view that the second wave has given us, more protection, that we should not be too worried right now?
Well, I concur with the fact that we should not panic. I also concur with the fact that India, based on the sero surveys, at the end of the second wave, possibly had about 920 to 940 million people exposed to the virus. Because remember, at that time, vaccination was very low. So anyone seropositive had to be because of infection. However, if you look at the data that is now coming out, that data is suggesting that even in people who have had prior infection with any of the variants, there is roughly 5 times more breakthrough infections caused by Omicron than by Delta. So, people in India who have been exposed to the virus will be susceptible to reinfections by Omicron as well. Now, the question really is, what do you set your benchmark at? If your benchmark is infection, then we will have in the days to come large numbers of infections. But if your benchmark is hospitalization or disease, then I think those numbers would remain limited. So it really depends where you set your benchmarks.
Okay.
Yeah. But I might also add that
there, Dr. Jameel, is the one about boosters.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
So 2 doses of the mRNA vaccine protected against Delta very well, but the antibody levels went down by about 60% in 5 months, which was boosted back to about 95% neutralization efficiency with the booster of a mRNA vaccine. If you look at Omicron, 2 doses of an mRNA vaccine reduced the titers, neutralization titers, down to about 30%. And the boosting only took it up to about 75% and not 95%. The Covishield vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, is, to begin with, doesn't give as high antibody response as the mRNA vaccines do. But the Covishield vaccine gives very good T cells. So again, I keep coming back to the point that you have to decide what your benchmark is, whether you're going to get worried about infections or you're going to get worried when there will be more disease and hospitalization. But unfortunately, you can't wait for that. And therefore, it is important to keep systems prepared. If more infections happen, more infections will mean naturally more people getting into hospitals. So we should not be caught unprepared like we were in March and April. We have to keep systems prepared, but we don't have to panic.
Already, and one point I like to add, Tamanna, over here is that you see the Ministry of Home Affairs has already issued the guidelines with regard to the preparedness at different levels, including the system preparedness. But one thing which I like to add at this point of time is that we need to look at the occurrence of Omicron, because if we were to look at the African continent as a whole and Africa as a whole, you see the virus is going to find susceptible hosts. So this pandemic has to be addressed at a global level. Now the time has come, where we need to be talking about the issues about equity and equality with regard to, why you see the countries start, giving boosters rather than sharing with the haves and have-nots. There are countries where we have even less than 1% of the population which is immunized. So today we are talking of Omicron, tomorrow we will be talking of some other variant. And luckily for us, Omicron is having, less severity, in terms of infections, as Dr. Jameel already pointed out with regard to the benchmarks which we are going to set, because we will not have much of hospitalizations, we will have tests. As it is, we are very diverse and people perceive their problems, in a much lesser number, and they will, this will go past as a kind of a, minor disease as well. So our debate also has to focus upon the issue of across the world, the COVAX and vaccine method, at a larger level, so that, if we will not be protected at all, because we are a large number of population. So we need to look from that perspective as well, so that, if we are going to take care of the susceptible hosts, then automatically,
I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we need to address that whole issue.
I think we first need to finish our targets of vaccinating all adults. Sure, absolutely, ma'am. We had a target of vaccinating all adults by the end of this year. That might spill over into the next couple of months. But we need to hit that target. We need to start vaccinating children. Those between 12 to 18 are vaccinated in many countries of the world, but not yet in India. So we have a long way to go, and then you have the Omicron coming in as well. But thank you to both of you for joining us with this update and all of the insight, so that we can make sense of the latest information coming through. So thank you for joining us this evening
Thank
on
you
the
so much.
India
Thank
Development
you.
Debate. Let me move on.